Good afternoon, everyone. We'll just give it a couple more seconds just to make sure that everyone can join. Also, we'll look to start in the next minute or so. But what I'll do is I'll introduce myself, introduce the webinar, outline some housekeeping rules, and then we'll start very promptly with the presentations today. We'll just leave it another minute. So the joining rate seems to have slowed down slightly. So what I'll do is I'll start the session off. However, I will be in the chat as well and remind everyone of the housekeeping rules if they have joined a little later. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Fraser Ricketson, and I'll be chairing today's webinar, What to Check For in Your Technology Contracts. We're joined today by 3 speakers whom I'll introduce shortly. Before we begin today's session, I just want to remind attendees of some of the housekeeping rules. So this webinar is being recorded and the recording has already begun. This is so that those who cannot attend the session or would like to look back at the webinar presentations can rewatch it. This will be shared with all attendees along with a copy of the presentation slides after the event. During the presentations, please can we make sure that all attendees are muted and that their cameras are off. This is so that the presenters can be both seen clearly and also heard. Within the Q&A section of this event, please could you use the Q&A function provided within Zoom rather than the chat. If you can't access this function, you can also email your questions to myself and I'll put my email into the chat, but the Q&A function should be at the bottom of your screens. Would we be able to move to the next slide, please? On screen now is the agenda for today's event. After each presentation, there'll be a 5-minute reflection point if you have any immediate questions for the speakers. Our second presentation will have the Q&A session a bit longer for the second presentation. However, we will then move to the third and then have a Q&A session for the entire panel. We move to the next slide. Before we begin, I thought it would be really useful to provide some context to who Digital Care Hub are. Digital Care Hub is a partnership project run by members of the Care Provider Alliance. They represent care providers of adults with physical, sensory or learning disabilities and people with mental ill health and older people. Importantly, Digital Care Hub is run by social care providers for social care providers. They work in partnership with providers, representative bodies and statutory bodies to support the digital journey of adult social care providers in England and are funded by the Department of Health and Social Care and NHS England. I am from Care England, one of the representative bodies in partnership with Digital Care Hub and also within the CPA. This event is part of the Digital Care Hub Masterclass series and is one of 2 parts, with the next part taking place next week at the same time. I'll put a link to register for this on the link to register for this is on the slides, but I'll put a link into the chat also. I want to take this opportunity to thank the NHS Transformation Directorate Digitising Social Care Programme for funding this series. So now I'd like to take this opportunity and welcome our first speaker, Chris Barber from Mar Procurement. Mar Procurement are a procurement specialist focused on supporting clients in the social care sector. They are a values-based company relentlessly focused on integrity, fairness, and quality. In everything they do, they believe in doing things better, ensuring fairness for clients and suppliers, and always doing the right thing. Christoph Mar has worked with over 60 care groups to identify and deliver operational efficiencies and cost-saving initiatives. We have with us from Mar Procurement, Chris Barber, who's the principal consultant. With over 12 years of experience within procurement, Chris will be sharing Mar's perspective on how to make procurement exercises within the IT and digital spaces a success. So Chris, I'll pass over to you now.
Great stuff. Right, thanks very much for that, Fraser. Hi everyone, really pleased to be here today to talk to you about this topic. Here at Mar, we've worked with a wide range of clients to successfully deliver numerous complex sourcing projects, such as those found within the digital space, and we've taken all of that experience, tried to get a really summarised presentation today that looks at, one, why it's important to make procurement within digital successful and some of the pitfalls that we've seen clients make, 2, what processes to follow at a high level, and 3, what are the most critical elements to make sure you get right to secure a positive outcome. So it's a big topic, and obviously I'm available for more detailed discussions as a follow-up. But as I said, we've tried to summarize the key points for you today to get you started. So first off then, why it's important to get this right and some of the pitfalls that we've seen when working with clients. So firstly, operational disruptions. So we all utilize IT systems now, and we've all experienced frustration when they don't work. If the timesheet system isn't configured properly, or if there's multiple accounting packages that are not talking to each other, it creates manual processes, workarounds, or repetition of work. And to help with understanding the technical nuances of systems specification, one pitfall the clients often make is that they don't engage experts in their process, and particularly involving suppliers as well to help them define what their requirements are in this area. To reputational damage, quite a similar point, in that if the system isn't working correctly, internal staff can become frustrated or disengaged, or if it's an external facing system such as related to payroll, any breakdowns or malfunctions can quite quickly have an impact on the perception of your business. Point 3, user acceptance of change. So this is a really important point for digital. So any change or an introduction of a new system is likely to affect quite a lot of people in a meaningful way. So ensuring that you've got early engagement, detailed training, and regular communications throughout the project can really help to bring people on the journey with you. Sorry, Fraser, you raised your hand.
Hi, Chris. Just very quickly, would you be able to move the microphone a bit closer to your mouth, because someone's raised that their connection is a bit difficult and we can't quite hear fully.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I'll move a little closer.
Thank you.
Fine. Okay, perfect. So number 4, spiraling costs. So procurement exercises can be expensive. Done correctly, you're deploying significant resources to achieve a result. And within the digital space, costs really can start to escalate if the exercise isn't effective. For example, we've seen it where client specifications creep wider and wider to what they originally anticipated, or some clients end up in a situation where they've ended up with duplication of service across multiple systems. Or in the worst case, and particularly if you're subject to public sector procurement rules, an exercise might need to be restarted, and that's when costs really do creep in. And I think another pitfall we see clients here make is that they underestimate how difficult it can be to source in this area. A process is going to take quite a long time, and as is the implementation phase as well. And lastly, reduce competitive advantage. So all organizations are adopting more and more technology, and if it's done right, efficiencies can be achieved, data is more visible, and processes are automated. But a challenge that you've got to get right when you work on a process like this is to not just consider today's requirements, but also consider your future requirements as well. It's not an exercise you want to be repeating each year. You want to deliver something which is going to last for 3 or 5 years. We can move on to the next slide now. So now we're going to have a look at the process that we would suggest that you would follow. So this is our 7-step approach to a procurement process, and we'll talk about some of the nuances for digital systems specifically. So any good procurement process is going to start off with understanding what it is you want and need. So you would always begin with some quantitative analysis, so working out what you bought or what you spent before, how, when, by who, etc. And you're going to need to complement this with some qualitative analysis. So conducting interviews with internal stakeholders, so budget holders or end users, utilizing questionnaires, running workshops, whatever it is you need to do in order to establish what it is you need and what you want. And there is a difference between the two from a supplier in this area. And what we would do when running through this process is follow a systematic approach of looking at the AQSCIS model. So assurance of supply, quality, service, cost, innovation, and sustainability, and take each area in turn and review what it is you want and what you need, and what you want and need today and what you want to need in the future. So it's quite tough in this area. Obviously, you need to confirm your general requirements from a supply perspective. However, you also really need to get some help in locking down what your technical specification is. And this is when you can lean on expertise. So that could be from your internal IT team. It could be from external experts, both from the procurement side of it or from the technical side of it. But you should also not be afraid to lean on suppliers for knowledge as well. Everyone here is the expert at delivering great care. Don't be afraid to lean on the people who are the experts at developing and delivering IT systems, because they can really help you understand what it is you want and need. Step 3 and step 4 are a little more external focused. So step 3, conduct supply market analysis. So the first part of this is understanding who you want to approach. So you might have done some Googling, you might have had a recommendation, or perhaps you're following a framework. So there's a preferred supplier list that you want to engage with. Whatever it is, just need to work out who you want to approach. And you want to make sure you approach enough people that you get a decent response rate, but you also need to be mindful that the evaluation in this area is quite intensive, and therefore you want to balance off not getting too many responses back as well. And the other half to this area is around benchmarking as well. So I'd take the chance to try and understand what other companies have done in the area that you're interested in. So what have they implemented? How did they do it? And what worked for them? Step 4, so developing a category strategy. So you're marrying your internal requirements with what you've learned about the external marketplace, and then you're deciding how you're going to market. So whether you're running a tender, whether you're running a direct award, whether you're following a framework, you have to decide what you're doing. Then 5, select suppliers and negotiate. So you've executed your process, and probably the most important part of this is the evaluation. How do you select the supplier that you want to proceed with? And what we would always try and say here is the business requirements work that you did earlier in the process, that should draw through naturally to this area. So using the criteria that you identified that you want to need under those headings of AQS, CIS, and you're pressure testing the responses you have back to make sure that what you're seeing is meeting your requirements. And you need to design how you're going to evaluate this as well. There might be a written proposal you're scoring, there might be a presentation session, there might be a system demo. There's a few different ways you want to approach this. But whatever you do, you need to make sure it's robust, and you need to make sure it's objective, and you need to make sure it's cross-functional as well. So you've got the right expertise looking in the right area. So technical people looking at technical stuff, financial people looking at commercials, etc. 6, implementation. So once you've decided the supplier you want to work with, I suppose the first thing to say is don't underestimate how long this can take. What you should ask for as part of the tender is a detailed implementation plan from all of the suppliers, and you should look to compare and contrast them to assess whether they feel realistic or achievable. And clients can often want to try and shrink a timeline, and suppliers will always be willing to offer to support that. But we think that can lead to more issues later down the line, because it usually means that you'll have to invest more resource in order to deliver it quicker, or you might have to take some shortcuts. So you might launch with a system that isn't quite as whole as you first intended it to be. So depending on the complexity of the system that you're purchasing, depending on the existing contractual arrangements, a project could take 12 or 18 months. So you do need to plan for that accordingly. The second part of implementation is making sure you've got the right project management set up. So internally, you need to assign someone who's responsible for the delivery, but you also need to support them with the right escalation points around them. So sponsors and the rating matrix as well. And you want to try and make sure that you also have that infrastructure set up on the supplier side, mirroring yours. So there's someone responsible, but again, that person has the right routes to escalate issues as they arise, which they inevitably will, as implementation is difficult and there are always issues. So the last part of implementation as well is when you really need to be really clear on what it is you're about to sign up to. So fine detail of the commercials and the contract. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of those things that you need to be aware of. But yeah, the final point is making sure you're really clear about what it is you're going to sign up to. And then lastly, step 7, manage the supplier. So once you've gone through implementation and you're up and running, the job isn't done. You really need to make sure you've got an ongoing review process set up with the supplier, which will be a mix of operational focus meetings, which are tackling short-term issues and working through those, but also on a semi-regular basis as well, and a slightly more strategic meeting. So you're looking at, is the system overarching meeting your requirements, planning for future changes, and you're capitalizing on any updates that come down the track from the supplier as well. I think we can skip to the next slide now. So we've looked at the process at a high level. Here, I've just pulled out what we think are the 6 key things to get right to make sure that your process is a success. So firstly, cross-functional stakeholder engagement. So this is about being aware that an initiative like this is going to impact multiple functions, not just operations and IT, just making sure there's representation from all of the appropriate functions. And those that are engaged need to be really clear on what their roles and responsibilities are. So are they doing something, are they inputting to something, or are they approving something? And stakeholders need to be engaged before the process. So there's some macro comms to help them understand what's happening during the process. So perhaps feeding into requirements or helping you with your evaluation. And then after the process as well, in making sure that implementation and rollout is smooth. Point two, making sure that there's technical expertise involved. So this could be from your internal IT team, could be from external support. And as I said before, don't be afraid to gather insight from suppliers who are the true experts in this area to help you lock down what it is you want and need. Three, be realistic on timings. As I said, this is a time-consuming process depending on your business, your obligations, and your current contractual situation. The process could take 3 or 6 months. And then the implementation after that, again, could be 12, 18, or more months after that. So you need to make sure that you're really clear on any existing termination contract dates and termination provisions and any potential risk of not having service matched up to the new system that you're implementing. Point four, develop a robust scoring process. So as I said, make sure all factors are considered across assurance of supply, quality, service, cost, innovation, and sustainability. And make sure you have your wants and your needs split out. Needs being things that must happen are almost binary. The supplier can do it or they cannot. And wants being something where you can score slightly more subjectively. And make sure, again, that your requirements are considering what you need today, but also any major changes that might be happening in your business over the next 3 or 5 years. Point five, change management. So this is a holistic plan. There'll be some macro communication at the start, as I said, to make sure that the business is aware of what's coming. You want to involve the appropriate stakeholders in the process so they've had a chance to input into what's being shaped. And then importantly, during the implementation phase, you need to make sure you've got a really good rollout plan in terms of training and upskilling. And this is, again, something that suppliers can help you with. Suppliers have lots of resources here. They might have online databases. They might have live forums. They might run webinars for key customers. They might offer some direct training for you. They might offer written collateral. They've got lots of things that can support you to make sure that you've got a decent training plan so that as the system is being rolled out, your end users are going to be ready for the change. And then lastly, clarity on implementation. So one, in terms of the timeline, the plan, but this is also around what I mentioned before, what you're signing up to, the commercials, the fine detail of it. So, you need to make sure you're really clear on phasing of any payments, what's the split of OPEX and CAPEX spends, what flexibility there might be in licenses throughout the lifetime of the contract. Are there any KPIs in the contract? Do the KPIs reflect what your business requirements are? Do the KPIs have teeth? Could you perhaps claw back service credits if things like the system isn't available as it should be? These are some of the things that you need to make sure you're really happy with before you get going. I think we can jump on to the next slide. So that was the body of the presentation, just to sort of roll it up then and really summarize the key bits. So firstly, I think to make sure that digital system procurement goes successfully for you is making sure you've got the right stakeholders involved. And that's both cross-functionally, but also the right seniority mix as well. And for those people that are engaged in the project, it's making sure that they're really clear on whether they're doing something or whether they're approving something. And it's really important that these people are engaged both before, during, and after the project as well. Secondly, you need to make sure you've got technical expertise involved in the project team, whether it's internal or external. But and as I said, really don't be afraid to lean on supplier knowledge here to help you button down what it is you want and what you need. 3, you need to make sure that there's sufficient time allowed both for the process, which can be complex, but also the implementation phase, which can take a significant amount of time. And lastly, you need to work closely with the supplier. This is a complex area where if you assign any contract, you're unlikely to make any changes for 3 to 5 years. So you want to get as close as you can to the supplier. And that means 1, having a really good understanding of contractual conditions you're signing up to, but also 2, being really clear about expectations both during the implementation phase and then also what the supply management program looks like post-go live. And then that is the final slide from my presentation. So that's it for me now, Fraser.
Thank you, Chris, for that presentation. I have received a couple questions through email, but I just want to see if anyone on the chat or via the questions and answers page on the Zoom would like to have any immediate reflections on this slide. I can't see any coming through at the moment. So, Chris, one question I received was, what are some of the key details to identify within contract documents and or commercial proposals?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I was touching on that at the end. So some of the things that you need to watch out for uh, from a cash perspective, I suppose, as I said, it's the phasing of payments. So when are um, when are you expected to start to make payments versus when is the system live? And you want to check that against your cash flow for any existing systems in case there's any overlap. That could be something which catches people out. In terms of the implementation phase, so how is the supplier charging for their time and effort to deliver the project? Most common ones are having a fixed cost, time materials cost, which is basically pays you go basically as long as it takes. There's merits of both options, but you've got to make sure you've got it clear on what you're signing up to. I mentioned flexibility of licenses, so you'll probably, depending on the system you're buying, have signed up to
Chris, your audio just became a bit muffled there at the end of that last sentence. I'm afraid.
Sorry. Okay. Yeah. Just to finish that off. So, two common costing models for implementation payments are fixed costs and time and materials. There's merits for both, but you just need to be really clear about which one you're signing up to. Flexibility in the number of licenses that you signed up to is one to watch out for. If your business significantly increases or decreases, what are the options for you in year 2, 3, 4, or longer in your contract? Price escalation clauses, that's another good thing to watch out for. So you probably have agreed a license price for year 1 of the contract, but how are they adjusting after that? So having some kind of agreed wording in there, perhaps to track an index, and having a process by which you both agree what is an acceptable price is something to make sure you've got included. From a service perspective, as I said, make sure you've got KPIs in there. Don't just take the generic ones from the supplier. Try to integrate your own requirements that you've specified in the process, so you really are getting what you want from the contract. And where possible, attach service credit mechanisms as well. So if there's things like downtime in the system, you could well be owed money back, and you want to make sure that you've got provisions for that. Other wider things as well, like GDPR, data handling. Depending on your business, you're going to have to make sure you've got a really good understanding of how the supplier is handling data. So yeah, I think there's some of the key things I can think of immediately to cover off.
Excellent, thank you, Chris. I haven't had any more immediate questions come through the Q&A or via email. However, so what we'll do is we'll move on to the next presentation. However, if members of the webinar would still like to ask questions on this for Chris, please do continue sending them through via email or the questions and answers. And in the questions section, what we'll do is we'll come back and we'll go through all of these with the whole panel. So for our next presentation, I'd like to invite David Winter to the virtual stage. So David has a wealth of experience with procuring software companies across many different industries, which he'll tell you all about. But he now works with Dudley Council, supporting providers on their digital journey. So David, I'll let you come in now.
Fantastic. Thanks, Fraser. Can you hear me actually, Fraser, just in the interest of audio quality? Can you hear what I'm saying?
Yes, it's clear for me, but if any of the attendees have any difficulties in the chat, please could they raise it and let us know.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's good. Oh, Palvi's giving a thumbs up. Appreciate that, Palvi. Thank you. Okay, can I have the next slide then, please? Okay, so as Fraser says, I'm a program manager working at Dudley Council, specialising in software, IT, and business transformation across many systems, but including Liquid Logic and Controc, which is a social care system used at Dudley, but also the working with the NHS and the ICB on a digital social care record system to actually work with the providers and the care homes to make sure that it works for them. So my background is it's a very commercial based background. Worked at lots and lots of different companies. In fact, 21 different companies. Working at Ernst and Young, working at Jaguar Land Rover, UCAS, Kinetic, and then more recently Dudley Council. So my previous background was so I'm a chartered electronics engineer. So I specialize in software and hardware design. So understanding the fundamentals around the design of the digital social care records actually gives me assistance with understanding and liaising with the technical personnel, as well as managing the actual project management of such systems. But again, working on many, many different procurements of different sizes. Yeah, I was invited to actually come and speak with you all, which I'm very, very excited about. So if you could put on to the next slide, please. Okay, so what I've done here is put together a number of hints and tips to actually make sure that if you're procuring anything, and it's not just a digital social care record, it's anything really that you'd want, and ultimately needs to make sure that it meets your requirements. So the first item I've got on there is for those people who have done a project management course or project managers themselves, they will have seen this triangle time and time before. So effectively, this is the time, scope, and cost triangle, where you're pulling up on those different derivatives around quality. And in relation to procurement, this is vitally important because if you're procuring anything, you need to make sure you've established some scoring criteria. So within that, how much is the software going to cost? That's very, very important. Make sure you've got the budget approved for that as well. What's the quality of the product that you're trying to achieve? And of course, when do you want it to be delivered by? So whenever you're putting scoring criteria, you're always basing around those questions, whatever it might be. Even the environmental sustainability of something comes within that remit because it's part of the quality remit. So it's vitally important that we put scoring criteria together. So next item, I said this 3 times: requirements, requirements, requirements. And I think that the best way to explain this is use an example. So if any of you were going to purchase a car, and imagine that you've got 6 people within your family, there's no point going to go and buy a car that's only got 5 seats because you need one that's got 6 or even 7. So at the end of the day, requirements are absolutely critical to getting something right. And whatever it might be, whether it be a car, a television, we've all got budgets to meet. So it's all right saying, oh yeah, that £2,000 TV meets my requirement, but I've only got £500 to spend. So therefore, you've actually got to use that time, cost and scope triangle to actually work out what's the best option. So requirements is absolutely critical. And it really is so important that you get any requirements signed off by your business stakeholders. So, and somebody who's accountable. So whether that be, the director or the manager of the association. And the next item I've got, again, this is experience not just within working at lots of different companies, but this is also experience personally. So if I purchase anything myself or actually do it via a company, I check the records that are available. So you've got, if you've got a limited company, you can actually go to the housing area, which effectively shows you how long the company's been established for, who the directors are, and it's all available to you publicly. So I would go and find out how long the company has actually been established for. And the reason for that is the next statistic that I'm going to say. And that is that in the first 5 years, it's actually 45% of companies fail. So therefore, I highly recommend that if you're looking at procuring a company, you go and look at how long it's been established for. Because with 45% failure rate in the first 5 years, that's nearly 50% of companies that fail. So therefore, it makes sense to actually check out how long the company's been in business for. And ideally, I actually look for, as long as possible, because it shows that it's actually got a hold in the market, they know what they're doing. They're doing something right. The next one that I've got, which sorry, I missed one, is making sure that you look at the reviews. So if you go on Google or a similar internet service provider, you can go and find information about a company. So if it was a digital social care record and you were looking at all the different companies, and there's lots of companies there's Carebeans and lots of others, you go and have a look on Google and find out information about that company. Has it got, how many reviews has it got? If it's got 100 and everybody's saying glowing things about it, giving 4 and 5 star reviews, that's a good indication of a company being good. And if the company's only got 1 and 2 star reviews, there clearly is some problems there. And it's trying to understand, what is good and what is bad. So I always, and that's for anything that I buy, I actually make sure that the company's established, they know what they're doing, and there's a good review portfolio where people have got good testimonials about them. And even within Dudley Council, I contract to Dudley Council, and I make sure that anything that we do, anything that we procure, is actually good. So if it's a liquid logic or contract item for the adult social care system, I check with other councils to make sure that they're actually got it's actually been working for them. It's reliable, it's robust, it does what it says on the tin, to give us confidence that this is actually a good solution. So therefore, it's very vitally important to check out reviews, and however you can do that as well. The next bullet point is about putting together the highest quality team. So I found time and time again, working at lots of different companies, is if you've got the right people, you really can achieve the moon on a stick. And often, I've gone to various boards and worked with boards, and sometimes the boards do want a moon on the stick. And if you have the right high quality of team around you, then you can achieve that. If you haven't got the right people in the team with the right skills, the right capability, the right attitude to people who can do and make things happen, you will struggle to deliver. And this goes, in hand for most things, but especially when you're putting together things like a digital social care record system, it's absolutely vital you've got the right specialists on the team to deliver on the tasks. Next one we've got is around target audience. So this is all about the users, whoever the users are. And again, from all the experience I've worked at with many companies, it's all about the user experience. So therefore, with work that we've done, internally in adult social care, we've always worked with the target audience. So if it is a portal which is for, adult social care, residents of Dudley, then we've actually worked with adult social care residents of Dudley to develop those systems. And that's right from the beginning, where you gather the requirements and actually take them on the journey all the way to the end, to the sign off of the system, and involving them in all the testing in between. So it's vital that you understand the users, the stakeholders around the system, and work with them to develop it and make sure that it meets their requirements. Next bullet point is about governance. So governance is critical. So why is governance critical? That's the important thing. So governance is critical so that you've got a decision-making forum. And that might be decision-making forum to decide on getting a budget approved. It might be a decision forum for talking about risk and risk management and making sure that you're dealing with those risks ahead of them happening and mitigating them accordingly. But it could be making sure that the requirements are signed off correctly. It's that decision-making forum, so you've actually got accountability within the framework of what you're trying to actually design, build, test, and actually then deliver to go live. So next item we've got is about planning and scheduling. So this is very much the bread and butter of what I do, as a program manager at Dudley Council. Everything needs to be scheduled. You need to have a Gantt chart, making it as simple as possible, but making it useful and practical. for the people and stakeholders that are going to be utilising that. So that's the team of people that you're working with, that's the senior stakeholders, the director, making sure that you all understand this is the timeline that we're working to, and this is what we're going to deliver in terms of the requirements. It's vitally important that the timeline is realistic, so that people who are actually going to be developing the solution, so if this was a digital social care record, this would be the supplier, so one of the sort of 20 or so assured suppliers, making sure that they are very clear on what they're going to deliver, that the people who are actually going to be delivering that system are bought into the timeline, and all the team and all the stakeholders are happy with what's going to be delivered and the timeline accordingly. Vital, vital, vital that the timeline is realistic. Communication, so understanding all of the stakeholders that we have across the system, making sure that we're engaging with those people, we're working with them, because you want to be bringing people on the journey with you. So you're kind of like hand-holding them from the start of the journey all the way to the end. The final point I've got on here is never be afraid of failing. And I know it says about success, but quite often to succeed, you need to fail. And don't be afraid of that. Don't be afraid of do everything you can in your power to succeed. But as part of that success, you on that journey, there'll be failure as well. And you need to you'll fall over, but it's about picking yourself back up and be determined to achieve anything. And I think that last point on there is the one thing that I can't emphasize enough. It's about be determined to succeed, no whatever the environment and conditions around you. Okay, can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so what we've got here then is a case study. So this is a digital social care record case study done in Dudley, which is a Dudley tiled house. So just to give a bit of a background about Dudley tiled house then, so it's a medium-sized care home, so it's got 48 beds. The staff, so Debbie Warren, who's the manager of the establishment, and all of her team are massively keen on making all of this happen, making the digital social care record happen. They're very, very keen. The however point though is I think they're quite atypical in the care homes that I visited myself. They're very atypical because they're very enthusiastic, but they have little to no experience in procuring of hardware and software systems or the implementation of a digital social care record. And that actual point is really important to note, that because if you're working with a team of people that are not sure, they're going to need hand-holding to get them over the line. So in terms of actually getting them over the line and getting everything implemented, so these are sort of the key actions that were needed to be carried out. So the first item is submitting the expression of interest. So the expression of interest is to ensure that Dudley Tiled House were actually interested in doing this piece of work, just like we've done with other care homes across Dudley. And it's just literally a one-page to say, we're interested in doing this. I'm Debbie Warren, the manager of the establishment, and we would like to go ahead with this. The next item is establishing the match funding. So as part of the arrangement with the NHS, there is a match funding item. So it's understanding how much money, and we've done it based upon beds. So how much money would the establishment get based upon those beds? So we calculated that. So this is how much money is going to be contributed from the NHS England. And therefore then, this is how much money it's going to look to cost overall for an atypical digital social care supplier. And therefore, how much money do you need to contribute for year one? And then accordingly, the full contribution would be required for year 2 onwards. And that needs to get approved for the budget almost before you go any further. So you need to understand what the sort of mandate of the cost is going to be and get that cost approved, because like with anything, if you haven't got the money agreed, you can't really go any further. So next step was to set up a governance board to enable the effective decision making. So kind of all of the items that I put together as the top tips, what I'm doing here is taking that theory and putting it into practice. Set up a delivery team with a designated lead. So you've got a team of people that are working on it. You've got various people, business analysts, you've got software developers, you've got trainers, but making sure you've actually got someone who's actually leading on that piece of work, someone who's at the helm, driving it forward to make it happen. Setting up a risk register. So within risk management, I also include issues as well. So you want to mitigate, think of all the risks that are possible, mitigate them, to put, mitigation plan in what you're going to do if that does happen. But also look at any issues that you are facing, and again, putting in something to try and actually tackle that issue. Gather the requirements. So what is it that you want, the DSCR to do for you? I mean, the NHS England team have actually put together a tool which effectively allows you to go through for a given type of provider. It allows you to select a number of requirements, and then based upon that, it will then select for you which of those suppliers are best matched to what you're actually trying to achieve. So we've used that. So we've gathered requirements with Debbie Warren. We've put together scoring criteria based upon what they want to do with the DSCR. So the requirements, when they want it to happen, and of course, how much is it going to cost? Get that all agreed, the governance board. So selecting the assured supplier, as I said, using the selection tool, meet with the suppliers. So if you've got 5 suppliers to meet, go and meet with them. And again, what Debbie's found, Debbie Warren, is that a lot of them are very good at marketing, very good at giving you information, often which is quite overwhelming. And then sometimes what you need to do is take a step back, look at what it is that you're trying to achieve, and look at things like, reviews on Google of that company. Go and have a look at how long that company's been established. Because if you've got a company that's been established for 20 years and it's got 5-star reviews across Google, that is a pretty good indication that that company knows what they're doing. Set the timeline for implementation, so you're clear on what it is, the timeline that you're working to, working with the supplier. Again, making sure it's realistic. Agreed assured supplier with the governance board. So there's someone, taking accountability of the work and making sure that everything is all bought into. Onboard the assured supplier. And now we've actually got the easy bit over and done with. We've then got the difficult bit, which is actually implementing it. And that's going through all the stages of making sure that you've designed what you want it to do. And that's looking at all the processes. So how does the process work currently, at the care home? And that's the kind of current state, if you like, in the business analyst terms. And then looking at the future state. So what do you want this to look like in the future with the implementation of this DSCR? And putting all the processes around that to actually make sure that you're meeting all of your requirements. Then you build it, or your supplier will build it, for you, will configure the DSCR to do what you want it to do. You test it again with your user audience, so user acceptance testing. You train the people that are going to be using the system to make sure they're very, very clear on how to use it, and continue with the working of such system. Communicating to all stakeholders that, along the journey, this is from the beginning all the way, to the end. And then, of course, going live with the system. And after that, there'll be all the wonderful things that the NHS wants to do, which is very important, which is measuring the benefits to make sure that, it meets the goals that have been set out by NHS England. Okay. Any questions, anybody?
Hi, David. Thank you for that. We have had a few questions come through. So one of them was that you mentioned earlier when going out on this process about looking at some of the reviews when you've done your own search. Someone's asked, how can you rely on those reviews? Are there any tips for that and like identifying the reviews to look for, etc.?
Yeah, so if you just using an example here, I know that Care Beans are one of the assured suppliers. So you could just type in, I mean, everybody could do this now. Go onto Google and type in Care Beans and put Care Beans reviews, and it will come up with hits of Care Beans. And there might be items which are Google reviews. There might be items on various other sites showing reviews of that company. There might be even, if we're fortunate enough, look to find reviews on Trustpilot. So Trustpilot's a very good mechanism of looking out for companies and how good a company is. And Trustpilot's almost certainly going to be used by companies that are very well established.
Excellent, thank you. We've had another question as well, which is on your previous slide. So on point 2,
Yes.
there was the term governance mechanism used, and one of the attendees wanted to see if you could put more meaning to what that is meant by that term.
Okay then. So when we say governance, this is effectively like the decision-making forum ultimately, but also having the team below that. So if you set off with the top level board, so I have at Dudley Council, I have something called a project board, and on that project board, you've got all of the people that effectively are going to be affected by the work that you're doing. So the work that I do around liquid logic and contract, and also the DTF work around digital social care record, that affects the heads of service, in Dudley Council and adult social care. So there's 5 different heads of service. We've got safeguarding, we've got A&I, we've got A&P, we've got mental health, we've got Dudley Disability Services. So we've got all of those 5 different heads of service that sit on the board. We have an information governance manager that makes sure that anything we're doing to do with data protection is all clear and concise, because we don't want to do anything that's wrong, and we're going to get fined for a data protection breach. We've got on there IT. So IT effectively enables us to have things like the servers that host all of the liquid logic and contract systems for the adult social care system. So we have IT on there to actually look after those stakeholders. Who else do we have? We have a person who takes the minutes, quite important person that is. So we have lots of actions that come out of those meetings. So we have a PA who takes all of the minutes, and she is absolutely fantastic at her job. So very, very important role. Who else do we have? We have also on our board the person who's a senior manager, who's the most representative of the providers. So all the care homes. So that is a senior manager in the commissioning team. So Julie Cox sits on the board as well. We also have the internal business change manager on the board, effectively, because quite often businesses review usual items. They've got a business change request that comes in internally. Sometimes those business change requests cannot be satisfied outside of the project. So we have to use the contractors to develop the liquid logic and contract systems. So therefore, we have the business change manager on that team as well. But basically, we've got all of the stakeholders that are the decision makers of Dudley Adult Social Care. I also meet up with separately every 2 months. I meet with the Adult Social Care Director to run through, a summary about what we discussed at the board. But because the board is very mature, it doesn't need Matt Bauscher, the Adult Social Care Director's attention, because it delivers and it's successful in its mandate. So just underneath that governance mechanism, so that's the top level project board, if you like, we have a team. So these are the team, these are the contractor specialists, these are the business analysts in the team, the business as usual staff that are going to be looking after this ongoing outside of the project as you move into operations. So we have a team meeting every few weeks to go through the status of the work to make sure you're progressing with it. So clear what are the risks, any blockers that are effectively going to stop us making progress for the next 2 weeks. Have we had any problems? How do we get over those hurdles? And ultimately seeing where are we today and where then do we want to be in 2 weeks' time. So we're always planning and thinking ahead, using the initial plan as the baseline to build upon.
Thank you, David, for that. And appreciating that you do need to leave at 3. We'll take a bit longer on this reflection point just so that all the questions can be asked. So we have received one question as well, which is why is scoring criteria important?
Okay, so the scoring criteria is important because relating back to the triangle of scope, cost, and time, it's making sure that you actually appreciate in those 3 different areas and how they have an effect on quality. So again, some people, some companies actually are not so much interested in the cost of something. They more want to just get it delivered. So you can actually put, more resource at something to actually get it delivered quickly, but it's going to cost more money to do. Some people actually want the quality, the overall quality, so all the requirements, they want literally the moon on the stick, and therefore the scope is massive, and that often takes more time. And you can sometimes reduce the time by having more resources, but again, it's all about having the right resources to deliver the work. But the scoring criteria is basically pulling on that. So it's a list of all of the items that you want to do. So one of the items will be the scope, which is the requirements, and the list of all the things that you'd want the digital social care record to do, for that care home. And different care homes want different things. They've got different priorities. So whilst there is a general requirement for digital social care record, and that's why the NHS have put together this assured framework. So all of those 20 assured suppliers meet a minimum requirements for the NHS to provide a digital social care record. So that's good news, but some of them do different things, and therefore that's why it's important to put scoring criteria together.
Thank you for that. And I think from this then, another question has come about, which is, do you have any other examples of successful software implementation with care homes and other providers?
Yes, I do actually. So on our adult social care project, we've fairly recently actually delivered a system across the providers of Dudley, and it's actually called quite appropriately actually it's called the provider portal, because it's a portal for the providers. So it links to our adult social care system, so our liquid logic and contract system. And what it enables to happen is all of the invoice payments and the monies that are passed in between ourselves and the costs and the real amount of time that they've actually incurred, for their actual care home. That's all done online on an online system. So they've got an online system to work on, at their end, and it's all, on a website. So effectively, they've not got to, install any software on their side. So they actually, put all the data in on there. We put all the data on our side. So we are able to seamlessly work with them, almost with back office actions with the provider, to make sure that they actually all get paid effectively, get paid on time. They submit, the invoices, we pay the invoices, but we can check what they're saying and things like that. But it's a very seamless operation to make sure that we're doing things as lean as possible. And that's gone live with all the providers within Dudley.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, David. I can't see any more questions within the question and answer forum. So in the interest of time as well, I will move on to our next speaker, Palvi, who's COO and co-founder of Serene Care. But David, I want to thank you for your time today. And if any other attendees have any questions for David, we will share his contact information when we share the slides. But please do put your questions in and we can feed back to them in the meantime. So thank you very much, David.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Thanks, everybody.
And we have our final presenter, Palvi. So Palvi, I'll let you introduce yourself and then please do give our speech.
Perfect. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak. For those who don't know me, my name is Palvi Dodia and I'm co-founder and director of Serene Care. So I own, along with my partner Jay, we own 4 care homes, and this week we actually bought our 4th one. And I'm really glad to that I've been invited to this talk, because it was actually through digitization we were able to grow. So in addition to being care home owners, I actually I'm quite a vocal advocate for the sector. And one thing that I'm very proud of was that I'm the co-chair of the People Plan for Social Care with a lot of fantastic other collaborators for the Institute of Health and Social Care. But also that along with Dr. Caroline Green, who works for Oxford University in the Ethics and AI faculty, we wrote a paper together on how small care providers and their managers can digitalize. We did this about a year ago, and it's really just documenting our journey. Not only was it talking about our journey, but also how other small providers can do it. So Jay and I actually haven't come from traditional social care backgrounds. We've come from investment banking backgrounds. With that, we've had to learn a lot on the ground. So we've done this for 9 years when we bought our first care home to where we are now with our 4th one. And a lot of it has been reapplying knowledge that we've got from other sectors. And that is mainly investment banking. And we were wondering how we would be able to scale up the way we wanted. As we are husband, wife, we have children. We don't actually live very close to the care home. Our closest one is 45 minutes away. Our furthest one is an hour and a half. It is really important that we can digitalize. Whilst I could talk about all aspects of digitalization that we do, I will focus on the digital social care records for this portion. Now, we started ourselves 2 years ago with the journey. It was something that we thought we were already doing. We really weren't. What we used to do was type up our care plans. We typed our care plans up because they looked neater than not. But what we did find was there was a really high inconsistent standards in our care plans. There were lots of sections missing, people printing pages off. There were version errors. There were all the things that you wouldn't want. And then, as always, there's the fear that CQC would walk in and your papers would be inconsistent. However, more important than that someone will rely on the care plan for looking after a resident, and actually the information would be wrong. So you always have to think about your social care records in the view that if someone who didn't know your resident or service, worst case being an agency staff, could they take a look, could they care for that person using that? And I couldn't say with confidence we could. And it was something that we were really, really concerned about, because depending on which service we had, even with the 2 services we had, and depending on if it was a manager, deputy, or a senior carer writing that care plan, we saw that people were just writing it differently. And that's fine. We want it all written in a person-centered way. But there were whole sections missing, and we could notice a whole almost training gap that was happening in the section. So with it, we started exploring digital social care records. Now, there is so much information out there, and as a provider, it can be overwhelming, which is why I thought it'd be really good for me to tell you how we went about it, recognizing that there's so many different strategies and, our way may not be the right way. We first of all just went back to the basics of what Christopher was mentioning and David was mentioning. We just attended a lot of events. We went to lots of care shows and lots of care sector events to make sure we could actually go and meet providers or suppliers of these care plan softwares, and just tried them. We just saw if it was intuitive for us and tried it. And now we found that going to a big large industry event where you can actually meet a lot of people in one small succession was really helpful for us, because we could actually make sure that we were sort of remembering everything in one go. We would try something on one system and then see if another system was better, and would keep doing it. Now, when you begin the journey, you don't know what you're looking for. And as a small provider, budget was a really important thing. So one thing we were looking at was what's the most, not the most cost effective, but what's the best value for money. So we found a particular supplier. We were trying lots and lots of them, and then we realized there's so many different things you can consider. So you'd have different budgets. That's one thing you should always consider. We were also trying to work out like interoperability. What I didn't want was lots and lots of different systems. So we wanted a digital care plan system that could also help with our medication. So there's they work with our email system. We didn't want a separate CRM system to track all our service user inquiries. So that's a different one. So we found a system that had lots of these features in one. And the other thing is, what we tried 2 years ago, we recognize will have evolved. So even our competitors that we may not have considered years ago have already got better. So I wouldn't really worry about, there's a lot of people that get worried about, have I picked the right one? If it's right for you right now, then it probably is right. If it ticks a lot of boxes. All the systems we're seeing are getting even more sophisticated over time. So even in a year, they'll have improved drastically. So I think that's one big thing I have noticed across the sector. The other thing is we have got the digital assured supplies list where you can get funding. So because we've got care homes in multiple regions, we actually needed to make sure that all three regions would fund the same care plan. So again, there was those sort of things that we had to work out to ask those questions. The next part of our journey, which I know is not relevant right now, is about full sensors, but it's again working with our digital care plans to ensure this all fits together. Now, we're quite quick to introduce digital care plans. So initially, it took us many years to decide on it, but when we did, we just implemented it in the service. We bought one home in February and we put the digital care plans in March. We've actually bought one home this week and we're implementing the digital care plans next week. It is probably the best thing we have done. The reason being, we buy turnaround homes where there's very low occupancy. So low occupancy means that you've got a lot less care plans to learn on. So in one of our service, which had a potential for 50 residents, when we purchased it, had 16 on day one. It is much easier digitizing 16 care plans than it is 50. So again, it's planning your timings and stuff. When we did staff meetings, there was a lot of the natural pushback that you can imagine. People would turn around and say, oh, I'm extremely worried. I'm not very good with IT. I'm really bad. I won't be able to do it. Please don't fire me. And there was a lot of that. And that came from staff that had naturally been in the sector a long time doing things a certain way. However, we've always been very supportive with them to explain that, no one's going to chuck you in the deep end. No one's going to fire you over this. All of these systems have been built for the sector. They've been built for people that just need something to be done quickly. We brought our suppliers in person. They did training in person, and that was very, very helpful. One question that I would recommend to everyone is please ensure you find out the upfront costs for these trainings and ongoing training. The other hidden gem that I wish that I knew about at the time, which I'm very fortunate about, is making sure you use a supplier that has good customer service. So everything that was said by Christopher as well was that, make sure you get the reviews, get the feedback. What are they like? Because everyone will be really good initially when they're trying to sell the product to you, but it's what happens after you've actually committed to them. What are they like 3 months later, 6 months later, a year later? I also think it's very clever that you ask the questions about hidden costs. Sometimes people don't offer it, and it's really important that you ask those questions up front. I think that's sort of like the very basic stuff. Even part of our report, it came up that so many people were really, really keen to digitize. But the one big thing that came up was we're very overwhelmed as a sector and we don't have time to digitize. And one thing I would say to everyone is we're so overwhelmed as a sector that it's almost necessary we digitize, because the sector won't grow forward and your business won't grow forward if you keep doing everything manually. So one thing that we did quite recently, so as I explained with turnaround specialists, we've got care homes that had 16 residents and now we have 36, and we were able to add 7 care plans in the last week because we've digitized. There's people that have got the ability to go in. Now, if you had to handwrite those 7 care plans, it would have been near impossible. And to ensure that the consistency, to ensure that the residents' records are correct, would have been very hard. Now, it is really important that your staff are engaged, that they're trained, that as a provider, as an owner, as a team, that you work with them, that you collaborate with them, and you find out why they're so scared. So those are few things that you must do. Basic. Now, the other thing that's really important is making sure your infrastructure is correct. So making sure your internet is stable, things like that is really important to ensure that your telephone line and your internet is very consistent and stuff. There's a few things that we've had to learn through the hard way, where we've had all the best intentions to digitize and things have gone wrong because our broadband line went down. We've had instances at 2 a.m. where the internet went down. So then we've had to, this was back early when we didn't think, oh, we should have a backup on our digital or on our internet, and my husband had to then put dongles in and such things. So again, it's one of those things that you don't know what you don't know. As anything, it's good to prepare for the unexpected. So if anything, make sure there's a lot of people cross-trained. It also gives rid of the dependencies on key man staff because everyone's writing their care plans in a consistent standard. It also gives the opportunity that when you hire people that are from overseas, that their records are also written in the same way, because the certain care plans that you'll see these days, they prompt a lot of questions. So even if you don't know what to write, they'll be like, oh, is Mrs. Jones got diabetes? If so, is it type 1? Is it type 2? Is it insulin? Is it metformin? And those questions keep following through, that sometimes you can actually use an AI style of saying, oh, I didn't actually think of it, but it prompts you to think about things you hadn't done before. That's kind of me in a nutshell. Fraser, did you want to ask anything?
Thank you for that, Palvi. It was incredibly insightful, and it's really great to hear from the provider's perspective themselves on the journey that they've taken.
Thank you.
So I've received some questions via email, and the first one is, what kind of things should a small provider be looking for, and how do you begin that search when you are going to look for it?
So first thing is look on your digital social care record to make sure that the care plan systems that you're looking for are already vouched for. So that's a good one, that you need a list of a few things. Here's a few that are already approved. Then start considering your own budget, start considering your own infrastructure. Am I able to do these things? You need to ask questions about, what are the ongoing costs? What are the licensing fees? How many phones will I need? How many iPads will I need? There's extra costs that are associated, and those are the things you should really be considering, and also the training costs that carry on from it.
Excellent, thank you. And another thing is, what are some of the issues that you might need to be mindful of?
Typically, I would say the pushback that comes from staff, because staff in general do get quite scared when they've never done it. You'll be surprised. There'll be a lot of people that are terrified, and there's a lot of people that aren't. And the way I explain it to people is, if you're not scared of WhatsApping people, that's as easy as it is. Sending a WhatsApp is just as easy as updating your digital social care record. You just need to be trained the first time to do it. And a lot of people quite instinctively have fob-in systems for their payroll. You walk in, you fob in, you will carry on. No one's scared of that. You just hand them a card, you show them where to fob in, and they start for the day. No one's sitting there going, oh, I'm digitizing, that's very terrifying, my payroll's going to be wrong. It's just how you sell it. It's the mindset around it.
Excellent, thank you.
That's right.
So if we move on to the next slide, I think this would be a really good opportunity for then Chris from our procurement to come in as well. And then we can have a short kind of panel section for some of the questions. So if any of the attendees do have any questions for either presenters, it'd be really good to hear from the both of you. And in between the presentations, we've had one question for you, Chris. And the question is, so I'm just going to get us up on my screen now. So One of them was, how can you help ensure that the end users adopt the system successfully?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Harvey was talking about some of these points there, but I think it starts right before the project starts. So all about that macro communication to let people know what's coming and why. It's getting people involved in the process as well, so inputting into what it is you want and helping you evaluate suppliers. And then we touched on it there as well, but making sure that there's the right type of, there's training available in the first instance, so it makes people feel really comfortable, but also different styles of training as well to suit, different end users. And then lastly as well, I think something depends on the size of your business, but perhaps sometimes you could have like a rollout champion or people who are responsible to help other people on the journey and help them get comfortable with the system as well. So yeah, there's probably stuff to do.
I couldn't agree more with the rollout champions. It's a really positive thing that we need, because there's some people that are really scared to ask the question, and also what you mentioned about everyone having different styles of learning. So sometimes we can teach over Teams and Zoom, and sometimes they just need it in person. Sometimes people just need to do it themselves to know how simple it is. Sometimes they like to be shown 3 times. Sometimes they want to make notes. Everyone, like in general, will need different ways to be taught. We just need to be patient to know that our end goal is to get everyone comfortable. But what's really interesting is that as we have 3 homes that have got digital care plans, when we get new joiners, the staff naturally teach them. So the new joiners don't come in scared. It's actually just a culture change of, when you're going from paper to digital, when the whole home needs to change, that's when you get the most amount of pushback. When you interview carers or seniors or anyone now and you say, oh, do you digitize? It's becoming so mainstream now that people are like, oh yeah, I've used it in my old place and I've used a different system, but it's something I'm familiar with. And we were just moving from paper to digitizing. So I think actually in a year from now, even, it'll be just that much more common as well.
Excellent. Thank you both for that input. We had another question as well, which is, what are some of the key aspects to include in supplier evaluation?
Yeah, sure. I could start off again. So I think I mentioned, each buyer is going to be different. The business is going to be different. They're going to have slightly different needs. But I think if you follow a systematic process of looking at things like what's important to you under quality, service, cost, innovation, sustainability, as well as your specific technical requirements, then that's going to help you get to the criteria by which you're going to measure suppliers that are coming to you. And as I said as well, it's really important to try and split out what are the things that you absolutely must have, and what are the things that you think you want. And then you want to make sure that you're using this criteria in your scoring process when you come to evaluate the suppliers. And I think something that's come up a couple of times here is actually meeting suppliers is a real benefit. Getting a feel for what it would be like to work with them and what the actual service will look like on a day-to-day basis. That sounds like that's been something which has been really important for people as well.
Yeah, it's really important to speak to other customers. Normally, suppliers don't mind sharing, the details of other customers. And something that sounds so obvious, but I asked my provider colleagues and I asked the obvious question of who are you using? How is it? What do you think? It's getting that real feedback from other providers is really good. There's lots of Facebook groups for managers and providers where people will just ask the question like, oh, I'm looking for a digital care plan. Who are you using? And then you suddenly see the group just explode with 20 people replying in 5 minutes. And they're normally people that have got quite good things to say about these things. What we have to remember is most of these things, if they've hit their shortlist, are pretty good. They're not going to be bad by any means because they've had to hit a certain standard. So it's a really good place to start, for sure.
It's a really good point. Definitely don't be afraid to ask for references. Any company worth the salt will be prepared to give them to you, and you'll be able to get a telephone call or a video call with another client who's implemented with them. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I would be. There's so many suppliers that I've just got that relationship with. When they put me email saying, do you mind just letting everyone know what you think of me? I'll be like more than happy. Because to be honest, if you give me great customer service, why would I not want to then be kind enough to share that with another potential client for you?
Excellent. Thank you both for that feedback. I'm monitoring the question and answer. Oh, we've just had one come in now. Do people feel excellent. Yes, I think we're answering some of the questions through as well from the Digital Care Hub side as well. Chris, I'm just trying to find the question for you. I haven't seen that question come through, Katie. So would you be able to maybe come off mute and then be able to ask that question? That's okay.
Oh, yeah, sure, Fraser. So there's a couple of questions which have come through in the Q&A. There's one, I think, which was for Chris at the beginning, which was what data protection certifications do you need to keep an eye out for when you're procuring for contracts?
Cool. Okay. So I suppose I'm not a really technical data protection expert, so you're going to need to check with whoever's responsible for data protection within your business. But it is an area you definitely want to pick out and closely look at within the contracts, because obviously these suppliers are going to be handling sensitive data. So it is a higher risk category than other areas. But things that your data protection officer are going to be interested in is things like where is the data stored, and if there are any other parties in the chain that might be handling the data in case it's processed or something like that. So there are a couple of things that they'll be interested in, but yeah, I would definitely check with whoever is responsible for your data protection requirements within your business to check specific requirements.
Great. And then there's a question about, does digitizing come with costs of extra devices to be used in cases of healthcare workers who go into the community? How best can we protect information when rolling out personal devices? Sorry, trying to take it.
I specialize in residential care homes, so I can focus on that side. So Chris, I'm not sure, can you help with that one?
I probably don't have the best detail to give an answer on. Probably have to take that away and investigate a little bit. I guess one thing comes if you are requiring extra devices. If you mentioned this, it's something you'll need to make clear about if the supplier's funding or not. I mean, not all digital systems will require additional handsets or tablets to be used. If you're procuring a service where it would need that sort of input, then yes, you do want to make sure about who's covering the cost. So I've heard of arrangements like that where the suppliers either will partially or fully fund it. But I think going back to what you said something earlier, Parvi, it's just about being really clear about what's within the contract for that. And in terms of data protection, again, yeah, that's probably one for your data protection officer and as well to make sure that there are no leaks.
Right. We also do provide through Digital Care Hub the Better Security, Better Care program advice around data protection and cybersecurity, which is free support to any CQC registered care organisations. So if you need some advice around sort of bring your own device policies and what you should be having in place for your staff from a cybersecurity perspective, if you get in touch with us, and I will send out links after this as well. There's free local support that you can access on it. Sorry, and then other questions. Can companies drop off the assured supplier list, which is probably one for me? Yes, they can. It's an annual process that they need to go through in order to remain on that list. Just as a follow-up question, we get a lot from that one. CQC aren't going to punish you if you're using a solution which isn't on that list. They don't assess software companies, they assess outcomes and sort of what good looks like under their framework. So that's an additional one we get. And then we have one, I'm intrigued by the launch of the Care Tech Guide. I wonder if any of the speakers have heard of it.
Yeah, that's the one that Daniel Custon has been working on. I've read it, it's really, really good. I know that there's really great contributors. I think Garant and Daniel have done a lot of work on that. I think it's fantastic, and I think that's a really important and interesting resource. I think that there is a lot of resources like that out there. There's a lot of things that you can see in social media. There's lots of industry events that you should probably attend as well. So quite frequently there is, like in March and April and in October, there's a lot of care shows and Health Plus care shows and dementia shows and all of those ones that UK Care Week. There's lots of supplies out there. If you're overwhelmed and you're not sure, go attend there, go see it, try it a few times in person. They typically will then have, like, you know, the demos. So make sure you sit through the demos as well afterwards, because it can be overwhelming when you're, you know, feel like you might be getting the hard sell. Most suppliers don't need to do the hard sell. They should be able to just show it to you and let the product speak for itself. And you should be able to do a number of demos with people, and you know, they should be able to then make you comfortable with the software and stuff.
Excellent. Thank you all for that feedback. We haven't had any further questions shared within the chat, so I think we can look to start to draw this session to a close. But before we close, I want to remind all attendees that there is funding available to help providers move to digital social care records and their digital journey. So this is available via the link on the screen and will be able to access in the materials we share afterwards. I would really encourage everyone not yet involved to have a look at what options are available to them, and we're here to support you on this journey, so please do get in touch if you need any help. We also have some resources which are available to help you with this, as well as future events that are on that offer further insight. So please do make sure to check these out, and again, if you have any questions, please do let us know. So it's 21 minutes past now, so I'll look to give 9 minutes of your lives back. So Katie, I'm not too sure if you have any final closing points that you'd like to share.
No, thanks so much, Fraser. Thanks, Palvi. Thanks, Chris. And I know he's dropped off, but thanks to David as well for joining today. We will get the recording, slides and transcripts to you as soon as we can. And if you do have any follow-up questions, do let us know and we'll come back to you over email as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Goodbye.